High Vibe Conversation. I'm your host, Shel Shapiro. With me today, we have Dorit Carlson. I've been practicing saying her name properly, and Stina Marie. Stina, I don't know if I need to add the bounce to your name because you have the two E's, though. Like, or is it just consonants? Like, do I have to say Stina? Like Stina? Stina.
This is
I don't
one
know.
for Dorit. So we're talking all about language and the different ways to pronounce things. So in Norway and
Yeah.
American dialect.
We got into a whole dialect conversation behind the scenes just now and having a little bit of fun with it. So we're going to carry it over to today's topic of discernment for sure. And before we jump into that, I'd like to remind everybody that this is a safe space. We invite you to share with us as we talk through our life lessons and space for you to work through yours. So what this means is that whether you are new here, watching us live, catching us on the replay, if you are resonating with the conversation that we're having, if you feel like you want to share your own insights or tips, talk about your own experiences, want to enjoy the fun with us as we giggle and laugh and have a good time, please feel free to chat with us in the comments. And if you feel like you want to join us individually for a high vibe conversation of your own, you can use the link on your screen to book a one-to-one conversation with the high vibe lady of your choosing. And I will, of course, pop this back up onto the screen towards the end of the live so that you don't have to go searching for it. And if you've been here before, you know that you can catch up on all the previous conversations. If you missed something, you want to watch the replay, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel seen here. And if you don't want to miss the upcoming conversations, make sure to subscribe as well so that you get notified when they're happening. That being said, let's talk about some discernment. We had a little bit of like a Merriam-Webster moment behind the scenes today too, because as we found out, there's not a clear word for discernment in Dorit's like native language. So we were trying to talk about that and figure out like what other words could we use to talk about discernment. And so I think that's a great place for me to start, because for me, discernment also I think of like self-awareness and perception, like to have that self-awareness and like of what's going on around me, the awareness of right and wrong, internal, external, so that I can judge for myself where I want to be or where things fall. And that for me is what I think of for discernment, of like me having the awareness. Again, I don't want to use the same word, but nothing else is coming in for me, of like what to be able to make that decision for myself. And so I'm trying to think of like an example of how I've used this in my experiences, and like really the best like thing that I can think of right now is that I don't know why I always had the right discernment tools at my disposal. Just as we were saying that Dorit doesn't always have like the words to like put things into English. Like there's not always a clear cut word for something. Like I don't know that I always knew what judgment was, since that's the word that I most closely like relate to with discernment. Like I used to think of judgment as being judgy, right? Like that I was being judgmental. And those are two totally separate things. So if we're getting into a word discussion and etymology and like history of different things, like I almost didn't have any discernment of like what was right or wrong, or internal, external, my thoughts, your thoughts, our thoughts. Like there was no clear divide or choice for me, because it was just, I took what everybody else said. I didn't want to put my own judgment on it or make that choice for myself. And so, yeah, it kind of like blurs the lines a little bit when you don't realize what that is for yourself. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation today. Dora asked to not go first or second, as the case may be. So Stina, I'm going to come over to you right now. What's coming up for you as we're talking more about discernment, and certainly this lesson on word etymology?
Yeah, so discernment for me, there's a little bit of religious undertone for me because I think this the first time I ever heard the word discernment was in some kind of religious context. I think it shows up in the Bible, having like the gift of discernment and being able to discern. I think it's between like evil spirits and like prophecies in the Bible. It's somebody who can discern like the word of God. Um, so there's definitely that, like you said, the judgment piece. And where I see it come in is when we don't have it's kind of I think of discernment as like, you said tool shell, a sharpened tool, to be able to discern, to be able to separate things. If you have a really sharp sense of discernment, you can do that like very cleanly and you can do it proactively. So when you're lacking discernment, it's like you end up in situations that you didn't really want to be in or connected to people that you realize aren't great people or don't treat you well. And I see that in like dating a lot. There's we talk about red flags and that kind of thing. Discernment is what's helping you go, there's a red flag, I'm going to get out, or, there's something that needs to be addressed here, or just like, I don't have a great feeling about this person. See, Melanie said discernment feels like a blend of observation and sorting through what we feel or see with care and clarity. That's beautiful. Well done. I love that. Yeah, so that feeling of like, ooh, this isn't a safe person or this isn't a safe situation. And discernment for me is a little bit more of the cognitive or intellectual side of it, where we can say, oh, this is why, or this is what I need to do. And it kind of turns those feelings or those observations into action and something that you can actually do to separate yourself or take whatever appropriate action there is.
Yeah, and again, this comes back to, for me, like the lack of discernment. In my past, it showed up as people pleasing, a lack of boundaries, and maybe being able to recognize that it wasn't a safe space or situation, or that it didn't feel quite right, but then kind of not having things in place to take the necessary action with care and clarity, as Melanie said, like to know what steps to do to get myself out of it, or like the opposite, that I stayed in it even though it felt wrong or bad and not great, because I didn't have that tool that sharpened, like clearly defined, like, okay, this is a no for me, and I get to get out of it, and here's how we're going to do that. So yeah, I definitely feel like it's only been in the last few years that I've really sharpened that tool more to be able to recognize it and then safely do what needs to get done. So yeah, I love having this conversation too, because I know so many people like words. I know Carl Sean Watkins, who may or may not be here right now, but he had commented on the event post earlier this week, and he was like, "This is going to be such a juicy conversation." And I was like, "I know, because you're a lover of the dictionary, and I know that you're a lover of the dictionary, in the same way that like Stina is a lover of words and is always giving us like almost a history lesson behind it in like the best way." Right? Like, because we get these juicy nuggets of like where the word came from and how that came to be. Um, for me, I'm always looking for like a synonym, the thesaurus version of like the dictionary, right? Like, I want to know how else I can say it that feels like me, because sometimes words in the dictionary don't, or like, I'm like, that word doesn't really sit right. Like, what other word? And exactly to that point, when we first started the discussion, I was like, all right, here's the words that I would use to describe this, right? We put it into our own words and feelings. So I love I love just being able to hear the different perspectives of it. And talking earlier when we first came on, learning how to pronounce each other's names better with the bounce or not. Ifeanyi, how I'm gonna butcher your name, and I'm sorry because I really want to be able to pronounce it properly. Stina, he loves your views, and I love that you're here today. Thank you so much. Please tell me phonetically maybe, or send me a voice note so that I can properly learn how to say your name, because really I'm not trying to butcher them at all. I'm just not great at sounding things out sometimes. So I love that you're here. Thank you so much. Melanie, I also love that you've come and given your take on discernment. I think you said that so succinctly and beautifully. Dorit, I want to come up to you now. Now that you've got some words in your toolbox, what's coming up for you as we're talking about discernment?
First of all, a question. Is discernment something that you are just born with, like it's something that you just have, like a strong instinct or something, or is it something that you learn?
My take would be learned.
Not both at once.
Learned/taught. I think that it's something that you can have a little bit of it just innately as a human, just like we all kind of, even as kids, like, when you're getting away with something, when you're doing something you're not supposed to do. But I think it's something that can be nurtured and fostered and like honored and respected. Just like, when we're talking about boundaries, it's like, are you born as somebody with boundaries? Well, we all have a sense of our boundaries. Were we actually taught to exercise that and say, this is my boundary, and then it was respected? So I think discernment is kind of like that. Is your discernment been honored and respected and like built up, or was it kind of pushed aside, and someone else's opinion was more important?
Okay, thanks. Michelle, did you have something you wanted to add, or?
Yeah, I mean, to Stina's point, I absolutely think that it's something developed over time, and that's why I am very like, I don't think I knew what discernment was up until a few years ago. Like that certainly wouldn't have been a word that I would have used for myself, but like I also don't think I started practicing my boundaries and like having that self-awareness. It was there, but I've developed it more over time. And I think that's the same for discernment. Like we might have like a little bit of it, and then we practice, and through practice we can get stronger with it and build it up. So hopefully that helps you answer.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, just to clarify why I'm asking, because here in Norway we don't have a word for it. So I struggled when we got this this topic for today. I was like, what is it? And was trying to kind of grasp and translate it into my language, and how to understand what it's all about. And actually right now, when Melanie explained it, that was the best explanation I've seen. That kind of with the observation and sorting, that I really like that. So for me, what I can kind of see in my life, up until I had my severe burnout, I based a lot of my decisions, my sorting and observations on knowledge. So I would gather as much knowledge as I could about something that I needed to make a decision about. And this being in the Stone Age, I had to go to the library and borrow books. So I would read, and I would really try to find as much information as possible, and sort through that information and kind of make it into a pro con kind of a thing to make my decision in the middle. But after that, because in my burnout, my head kind of went mush, and it was completely fog, and I couldn't put information in there for 7 years. So I needed to start making my decisions in another way, and I needed to trust my heart and my gut feeling to guide me in that. Yeah, so that's kind of how I understand it. I hope that's sort of what you're what it's all about.
Yeah, I think you jumped in there beautifully, Dora, and I love how you've woven in your experience of one, not having the word or the language for it, and two, of like what that looked like for you prior to your burnout, through your burnout, and now what you're looking for on the other side. So thank you for adding. I want to welcome Linda to the conversation. Thank you for being here, Linda. Before I give you the opportunity to jump in, I just want to share also some of these beautiful comments that we're getting on the side too. From again, tell me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, please, Anjan. Thank you for being here. I'm gonna try my best again. Ifeanyi, I love your comment here that you're growing in the area. No one's born with it. If you're stuck to the truth and transparency, then it'd be easy to detect whether it's not what's not straight or transparent, just like we get to detect ignorance when we're knowledgeable in a certain area. Like, I love that. Thank you for adding your view to the conversation. I love to see the interaction here from the audience. And again, Anjan, thank you. Like, he is singing your praises today. So we are here for it and more. Linda, we've been talking all about discernment, and really like having almost an etymology or a breakdown of the word and what that means, other words that we think of when we think of discernment. And we were talking about how Dora doesn't always have there is not a clear word for that in her language. So we were trying to explain what that looked like for us. So thank you. Now you're a little bit caught up on what we're talking about. So yeah, what's coming up for you?
Well, on the post it was discernment and intelligences, and I did a video with Eva Hoffman, so I put that out on LinkedIn. And so Eva and I were chatting about discernment and intelligences, and we all have certain almost like passions. That's how you can tell what your kind of superpower, I don't really like that word, intelligence is. So some people have a very logical, mathematical intelligence. I have a very strong spatial and body-kinesthetic. I'm a dancer, so I use my body. I move a lot. And Eva's going to be our guest next week. She moves a lot too. So body-kinesthetic is really high intelligence for her. And she had a really cute story about, because she has helped children quite a bit in finding out what their intelligences are. And of course, school just sticks with logical and linguistic. And this child, I think she gave the kids a checklist to circle, and he didn't circle any. And he said, I'm not good at anything. Like, he didn't have an intelligence. And she was saying how much she hated that word, intelligences. And she said, well, what do you like to do? And he said, well, he likes to help in his grandpa's garden, and he likes to be outside, and da 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 da. So he had a very strong naturalistic intelligence, and he filters the world, sees the world, connects the world through nature. So I thought that was interesting too. And yeah, discernment to me is like your gut, kind of at that soul level in non-duality. Just, okay, this is this and this is this. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is. And where does it break down for me? So if you're discerning between two different things, creating a big long list is one thing, but if you could only do one off that list, what is it? And usually that's the one that at that soul level, your intuition, you just know. So that's part of discernment for me.
I could so relate when you brought the gut into it. I was like, oh, yep, that I didn't even connect the two necessarily. But something you said about like how we connect, like what our gut decision would be, or like our gut feeling, intuition, we would just know. But sometimes we do need to write out the list of the way, the pros and cons, the good, the bad, the yes, the no, like, and then make the decision from there once we can see it in front of us. I also love how you mentioned the different ways, the different intelligences and different like ways that we learn or connect with the world. Which I think we try to do quite a bit in the different content that we all put out there, right? Like, are we just going to focus on the visual? Are we going to focus on the audio? Are we going to make it more interactive, and how we communicate and what we want other people to take away and do, the action we want them to take based on seeing and absorbing that information, because we all absorb that information differently. So that is part of the discernment too, really. Like, I like things, if I talk about myself, like, in the way that I learn and absorb information and then make those decisions, like, yes, I like seeing, I like hearing, but it's once I get to actually play in the thing and try it for myself, that's when I really like takes hold. So like for me, the discernment would be like that, almost that I can't discern until I test the waters for myself. It's not enough to just hear it or know it or believe it. I actually have to try it out and like, okay, yep, that one felt really good. And no, when I tried it this way, that feels really crappy. And so, yes, I'm going to be over here, not over here. And I think the fact that everybody can absorb that information differently and process it differently is their own way of discerning. And so if you've had a chance to play around with this word a little bit for yourself and really tap into what works for you and what doesn't, let us know. Let us know how you absorb information in the world, how you separate, if you're making lists or physically or tangibly, like what works for you, what doesn't. We really want to know, because it's not just about us here. We want to bring you into the conversation with us. And John, I want to bring up your comment too. Kid till 5 years has almost 10 times of power, intelligence, retention compared to an adult. Learning is a life. Yes, absolutely. Learning is a lifelong process. And so I'm trying to learn every single day, whether that's something small or large. Like, I am moving forward and trying to improve myself and discern better. Yeah, and John also says seeing is believing. Correctly discerned. Wonderful. I want to give you ladies the opportunity to add to the conversation if there's anything else that I missed. We've been talking about so many good things, so many comments today. So is there anything else that's coming up for you before we wrap up for today? And if
I
not,
think what Anjan was talking about was how children's brains have so much. I mean, by the time they're 2, there's so many cells and connections. It's too many, and they're just like, that's why 2-year-olds can feel like they're just crazy, because they are, and their brain's starting to prune. And kids are absolute sponges, at 4 especially. So by the time they're 5, they're pruning, and that's why they're like 10 times smarter than adults, if you will. So I think that's what he was referring to. And there are the learning styles, seeing and hearing and touching and all that. And then when it comes to the intelligences, there's spiritual and so body-kinesthetic. It's how I process and discern. It's not as much maybe how I learn, so it can be different for different people. So that's interesting too.
there's a toddler downstairs right now. She's 3, and I can just tell that she's like learning. She's always learning so much, but like I can tell when she's taking in the information, and you could literally see the little wheels turning in her head. Like I can see her eyeballs moving back and forth as she's like processing thing, and it's wonderful to be able to see it in children at such a young age, that she is learning how to process that information for herself. And so, yeah, as we're talking more about the brain and the learning process, I absolutely know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and you've seen it in action, right? And so that's a great time to teach kids different languages too.
Yeah, I didn't learn any languages as a kid. Maybe it would have been different, for sure. I want to bring up this comment. Do people get to know our discerning abilities? I don't think so. I think it's a personal and hidden thing on our side. We get to filter and sift information in our action chamber. Shell, this is in relation to your last comment. I think that's up to each individual person, whether or not they pay attention and recognize enough what other people's discerning abilities are. Like I think it's sometimes more important, and at least from my perception, that like we know what our own are, and then how it factors into other people's, like I definitely would say that I pay attention to other people's actions, but I don't know what their discerning abilities are as much, and I don't even know that I've even thought about that before you asked the question. So I think for me it's more about like being able to have that self-awareness and know for myself how I learn, process, interact, connect, make those decisions. But yeah, do I want to know everybody else's? I think I might go crazy if I tried. So yeah, I think that's a personal thing. Did anybody else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, the point isn't someone can tell you, oh, this is your intelligence, or you're right-handed, or make you right-handed. It's not what the point of it was, is that Eva was trained in all of the intelligence. She's written books on the intelligence, so she can spot them very quickly. And when you're bringing that to children as intelligences, it's like, oh, I'm not smart, I can't do anything. There's so many people that don't think they're enough, they don't think they're smart. And so it opened up his eyes when she said, what do you like to do, right? What do you like to do is your passion, right? And then she pointed that out to him. So she didn't make that decision for him. So just to be clear, it was a good point though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that she has she has the expertise and the knowledge, and we'll get into that discussion with Eva next week for sure. But she asked those curious questions to get him to open up and see it for himself too. Yeah, so like she could see it once asking the right questions, but it's it's the thing that pulled it out of him that got him to see it too, so that he yeah.
If whoever's watching wants to go to my LinkedIn profile, they'll see the video of me interviewing her about it and get a better gist of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Please go watch the video with Linda and Eva. It's definitely not one to miss, and we will be diving into this more and then some with Eva next week on High Vibe Conversations. And John also says, intelligence automatically translates into empathy and all great human traits we humans appreciate. Yes, we absolutely do. I feel like there's another conversation here worth having, maybe at a later time. So with that being said, stay tuned for more, for sure. And if you have any more comments, questions, insights that you want to add, please keep dropping them in the chat. We will come back to them. We will answer them. We will reach out to you. If you are not connected to the four of us, please make sure to reach out and connect with us here on LinkedIn. And I will pop up the banners too from earlier. If you'd like to come back, want to catch up on previous conversations, or just make sure that you don't miss when new ones are heading your way, please make sure to wrong one. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to continue the conversation with us more privately, this is where you can choose to schedule with one of us at your discretion for a one-to-one conversation of your own. Until next time, we'll say bye for now and have a wonderful day, everyone.